Today we're going to be working on how to create a frequency table in histogram. And so if you open up your foldable here, we're going to start with some rules for our frequency table in histograms. Our frequency table is the most important part is that we create equal intervals, which I'll explain in just a second, but we want to make sure that we're creating equal intervals in our frequency table. And once we do that, we set ourselves up to make a histogram, which is a data display, where we choose a scale factor for the y-axis to represent the frequency. We label the x and y-axis on the graph. We title the graph. We draw a bar for each frequency. And we must also know that bars must touch on a histogram. So that's kind of what makes a histogram special. A histogram will look very similar to a bar graph if you've done bar graphs in the past, but the biggest difference between the look of them is that a histogram's bars touch and a bar graph there's space between them. And so in order to make a histogram, we have to create a frequency table. And when we do our frequency table, we really want to make sure that we create equal intervals. Then when we do our histogram, we choose a scale for the y-axis to represent the frequency. So frequency on our histogram will always be on the y-axis. Frequency goes with the y-axis. Our intervals will be on the x-axis. So because we've created a table, the equal intervals, those will go on our x-axis. So we'll have already determined a scale for those. We'll label the x and y-axis on the graph. Again, the y-axis will always be frequency. The x-axis will be whatever our intervals are. We always want to make sure that we title our graph. We draw a bar for each frequency. Sometimes there will be a blank space if the frequency is 0, if that interval happens no times at all. And then we also need to know that bars must touch unless there's that 0 frequency. So we've got our rules for creating a histogram. And when you open up, we're going to do an example in the next video where we create a frequency table here using an example, and then we actually make the histogram for that frequency table here.